Ako si Archie Tulin at ito ang aking kwentong kalikasan. I'm Archie Tulin, Resource Management Officer of the Non-Timber Forest Products Exchange Program Philippines. I'm here to tell about my story and the work that we do with NTFP-EP Philippines with our partner Indigenous peoples here in Misamis Oriental and Bukidnon. As a kid, I knew I always loved science, specifically natural science. So that's why I took environmental management. I think dili ko gipanganak nga environmentalist. As compared nga to others, I think my waking up as an environmentalist is relatively later, compared sa others nga mas nagsugod sila in their teens volunteering. So I actually got that sense of environmentalism during college na. If not for Typhoon Land, maybe I wouldn't be here working with communities, working with NTFP. For me, Typhoon Land really opened my eyes that climate change is here, knocking on our doors. And from then on, I kind of sort of made a pledge to myself that to contribute, even unsa kagamay, to addressing the climate crisis. That's why I started my journey in development work. To tinuod ang ang development work, as they say, is a thankless job. In my family, ako lang yun ang nasa development work. So there are times, most of the times, even my own family, dili na mag-grasp ang context sa akong work. Pero what keeps me motivated, what keeps me moving for the past 8 years is the thought that even I am as a young person, can do little things for the communities. Na in the long run, it may make a positive impact for them, and especially for the environment, for the conservation of our forest. The NTFP-EP, or the Non-Timber Forest Products Exchange Program Philippines, we are actually a collaborative network of non-government organizations and community-based organizations. We actually work heavily with indigenous peoples and local communities on our dual goals on forest conservation and enhancement of livelihoods to these forest-dependent communities. We work on our 4 thematic programs. So we have the Tenure and Governance Program. This is where we assist communities in pushing for their advocacies, both on the ground, at the local level, and at the national. And our second program, this is where I come in, the Community-Based Conservation and Resource Management. As Resource Management Officer of NTFP-EP Philippines, I'm actually involved in implementing our community-based conservation and resource management initiatives. So that involves our forest restoration initiative. So for instance, here in Bukidnon and Misamis Oriental, we have a partnership with Ikosha. Ikosha, it's a search engine na like Google, na for every search you make, there's a tree that will be planted. Di ata sa ilang community nursery, kay kamulo ang mamasila ga-implementar sa kaning establish nila nga 20 hectares na rainforestation site kauban ang Ikosha. So mauni naa sa ilang nursery mga nagkadaiyang mga lumad nga kahoy, mga native trees. So kauban nato karon si Bae Arlinda Maluay, siya ang chairperson sa Mamasila Higaonon Tribal Community na naa diri sa Mati. Ang Mamasila partner sa NTFP sugad 2018, sa usa ka programa kauban ang Forest Foundation nga katong Community Red Plus Readiness Program. Bye, Arlinda, pwede na mo ipaila-ila kinsa ang Mamasila?
Ang Mamasila, sir, is isa siya ka acronym. Nag-stand siya sa upat ka gaok nga Mati, Manibay, Sibulig, at saka Languyod. So, kining Mamasila, isa siya ka federation diin pagka-organize sa maong Mamasila, nag-claim og ancestral domain diin. Para sa amua, kung anaan namang ko'y titulo nga mong mahawiran, mas ligon ang among pagprotekta sa among kalasangan. Tapos mas mapasiguro pa namang sunod nga henerasyon para nga na sila parang hawiran nga oy amuan nga area amuan nga luna amuan nga tangkabilin. So murag mas mapakusog pa namo ang among katungod isip mga higaon.
Dili man siguro kalimod na sa mga indigenous communities na agyod ang patriarchy. So si Bai Arlinda gani ipipila sa mga indigenous women na leader no nga part sad sa atong ginabuhat nga advocacy na breaking the bias no na stepping up the women agenda.
Sa ako as lipay kay ko nga ang mga tigulang no ang among mga dati is ning salig nako diin kala ko
Sige lang. Okay ra na. Sir Linda. Sige lang.
Okay na ka, ma'am?
Sige na.
lipay kay ko nga ning salig sila nako diin sa pagsugod yun nila pag claim sa ancestor dominis. Wala gyud ko nag-uban nila no akong husband before. Mao ilang kauban din after nga nawala siya so ila ko gipulis. Parang sa ako nga part is lisod kay siya i-handle kay wala ko experience sa pag sa community pero sa tabang sa sa mga tribal datos nga diin sila ang nag-uplift sa kuha.
Padulong ta karon sa isa sa rainforestation site sa Mamasila. Dinhi sa sitio si Bulig, Barangay Lunutan, Hingoog. Kamulo nila gina-establish ang ilang rainforestation site. So part ni siya sa kaning 10 hectares nga target kauban ang NTFP, Ikosha ug ang Mamasila. Rainforestation, it is actually both a forest restoration and farming approach, no. Sa una man gud ang atong thinking when we plant about trees is that whatever tree that we plant, it will automatically benefit the environment. So there are actually documentations, researches suggesting that when you plant a tree, you do not automatically contribute to environmental conservation. In fact, when you plant exotic trees, no, those trees that are not native to the natural ecosystem of that particular area, you do more harm than good. So kauban nato karon ang isa sa active nga youth volunteer sa Mamasila. So kani si J. Lord Javier. Since na partner na mo ang Mamasila, si J. Lord, actually daghan ni sila nga youth. Oo, si J. Lord mas siya ang involved sa mapping, kaya ang uban nga youth sa lahi sad sila nga aspect. So since nagpartner ang NTFP since 2018, moto active na gyud na figlang bigyet ang mga youth. Kay kada nay activity na agyud ni sila isip second line leaders. So kaning atbang nato mao man ni ang Mount Sumagaya. So mao ni siya ang ginaprotektahan gyud nga bukid sa Mamasila. Kay ilan ning sacred, no, sagrado nga bukid. Nga part sa ilang i-declare isip ICCA nga target this year. Kauban nato karon ang mao ni sila ang Mamasila Rainforestation team sa Sibulig. So si Kuya Bogs, Kuya Johnny, si Bai Gina. Si Bai Gina isa siya sa kanang IPLE women leaders sa Mamasila. Kani siya IPMR sad ni siya sa barangay. IPMR meaning Indigenous People's Mandatory Representative. So equal na kay ang tungod sa IPRA ginamandate ang LGU na dapat naay maglingkod kung naay IP communities diha sa isa barangay, mabutang mura siya barangay councilor.
Amo na protektahan para sa kabilin para sa akong lolo sir. Tas gusto na mo nga mapabilin pagid na siya kaysa karon nga mga henerasyon murag kanan na siya kawala. So kami mga basbasonon kami naging maningkamot dani gid.
After planting mauto among advocacy sad dapat i-change nato atong mindset nga ang mga tree planting activities dili lang siya ginatawag tree planting. Aside from planting, we nurture the trees. Usually 3 months after planting, naipahigayon nga maintenance. Second thing that we do on community-based conservation is we do for the promotion of the ICCAs, or these are the Indigenous Community Conserve Areas. At NTFP, we really work on a grassroots approach to conservation. That is why we are promoting the Indigenous Community Conserve Areas. So here in Mamasila, they are at the stage of documenting and mapping their ICCAs.
Ang gidabot na ako pag-survey, pagsuroy da sa lasang, o unsa nang maningog. Tas ako isa ga-mapping pag human mo survey, pag-uli mag-mapping na mi sa picture unsa mga pag-ila da sa manap da sa lasang.
It is important to document and to map ICCAs for the case that for the longest time the contributions of indigenous peoples in conserving our forests is not really acknowledged. So in documenting and mapping these areas, we make them see, no, for instance, the government and others not really involved in community development, that these are the actual contributions of indigenous peoples in forest conservation, in mitigating climate change.
Sigon sa among mga tigulang, gibilin sad ni nga ampingan namong kalasangan. Bisag wala na karon sila, pero nagpabilin gihapon nga naa sila among mahinumduman tungod sa kalasangan nga wala gid naunsa. Wala gid naunsa. Ug among ipasunod sa mga bata nga ingani ang pag-amping sa kinayahan dili usikan.
We heavily work with indigenous peoples on forest conservation because there is acknowledgement na for the longest time, indigenous peoples have been discriminated or marginalized. That's why many of the indigenous peoples here in the Philippines are vulnerable to aggressive development. There's also acknowledgement that, for instance, here in Bukidnon and Misamis Oriental, this is not an accident na most of their ancestral lands are still forested areas. And the third program, this is actually our niche program, the Community-Based Livelihoods and Enterprise Development. As our advocacy at the NTFP, we support communities in establishing their community-based enterprises through utilizing NTFPs or non-timber forest products. We believe in our conservation model that communities should not be prohibited in using their resources, their forest resources. Instead, they should be strengthened, empowered to sustainably use it. For the community here in Mamasila, in Clavera, in Hingoog, NTFP actually supported two community-based enterprises. So we have the Cinnamon Community-Based Enterprise and the Citronella Community-Based Enterprise. For the Cinnamon Community-Based Enterprise, this enterprise was actually established around 2019. So they're utilizing their naturally growing cinnamon here in Mount Sumagaya as flavoring to their pastry products. Karon naa si Ate Iset ug si Mami Char, so gabuhat sila og cinnamon bread kay naa sila kasamtangan nga gina-establishar nga community-based enterprise sa cinnamon. No, nga ang ilang ginagamit nga pang dugang taste sa ilang bread kaning bark sa cinnamon nga gikan sa ilang forest. So kani maon ni ang kanang gi finely grated na nga cinnamon bark, no, nga himo na siyang powder. Tapos kani ilang gina-add sa ilang dough para mahimong flavoring. Mao ni ilang isa sa ilang product. So aside sa cinnamon bread, katong mga dili mahalin nila nga freshly baked, so ilang after 2 days ila siyang ginabuhat, toasted bread. NTFP man good is we are actually pushing for ecofeminism, no? Because we believe na women for the longest time they have been marginalized, and because women mainly in our livelihoods initiative, they're really the ones doing livelihood work aside from the men. And our fourth program, the safeguarding culture, this is actually the central part of our program. In all the things that we do, we always see to it that their culture is being conserved, safeguarded, and promoted. So this is really the advocacy of NTFP. No, the value of our forest is not just the trees. No, it's not just the timber. There's more to the forest than just the trees or than just the timber. No, because as what our partner community said, these forests are their livelihoods. No, these forests are their identity. Matod pa sa among mga partner communities. Kung wala kuno ang forest, no, wala ang kultura. So kung wala ang forest, wala ang higoonon. So I think that for me, no, aside from the ecosystem services that we know, the services of the water, climate mitigation, and others, so what we overlook is the significance of the forest as spiritual. We are in the middle of a climate crisis, a climate emergency. Especially the Philippines is one of the countries with the most vulnerability to climate change, rising sea level. So, and one of the mitigating mechanism to which we can address this climate emergency is to put a premium towards protecting our forests, towards conserving the remaining forests. I think what's really fulfilling for me is that seeing that communities, it's the small victories, that I share with communities. The small gains, for example, they've planted this number of seedlings, reforested this number of hectares. At some point, it gives me joy na I'm part of that movement. I think that's my accomplishment for me, that I help them na do that. And that's not just for me, that's for them. Not just for them, but for the future Higaoners to come who will be living in their ancestral domain. I've been with NTFP for 8 years already. Siguro what's making me stay is the connection we're building with people, with communities. It's hearing their stories of hope, their stories of resilience, their stories of change. Is this something that I want to do for the rest of my life? Siguro life is full of uncertainties. But siguro until there are still communities who wanted to fight for the environment, wanted to fight for their culture, despite the many challenges nga naakaron sa atong modern society, dagko kayo ang mga challenges nga ilang ginaatubang, first diri sa Claveria ng intrusion sa aggressive na development. So naagid sila yung threat ng ginatubang. So as long as there are communities who wanting assistance as development worker, so I will continue.